My name is Damon Cross, and I married a woman who wasn't supposed to exist. 3 years ago, I lost everything in a single moment: my sight, my fiancée Sarah, and any belief that life could surprise me in good ways. The car accident left me with a multi-billion-dollar tech empire I could no longer see and a heart that had forgotten how to trust. When the Santos family approached me through intermediaries about an arranged marriage to settle their debts, I agreed not out of loneliness, but out of cold calculation. Victoria Santos needed money. I needed someone who wouldn't pretend to love a broken man. It seemed like a fair transaction. What I didn't know was that Victoria Santos had fled 2 days before our wedding. I discovered this later, of course, on that crisp October morning as I stood at the altar of the private chapel in my Malibu estate. I felt different. The woman who took my arm didn't smell like the expensive perfume Victoria had worn during our 3 awkward meetings. Instead, there was something softer, vanilla, and clean soap, like someone who worked with their hands. Her fingers trembled against mine, and when she whispered, "I do," her voice carried a weight that Victoria's rehearsed sweetness never had. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said, and when her lips touched mine, I tasted salt. She was crying, and something in my chest, something I thought had died with Sarah, stirred uncomfortably. But I was a businessman. I had learned to ignore inconvenient feelings and focus on the contract. Victoria Santos was now my wife, bound to me legally and financially, and whatever nerves she was experiencing would pass. After all, she was getting access to more money than her family had ever dreamed of. A few tears on our wedding day seemed like a small price to pay for financial security. Ethan, my assistant and closest friend, squeezed my shoulder after the ceremony. "She seems different than I expected," he murmured too quietly for others to hear. "Wedding nerves," I replied. But even as I said it, I wondered why Victoria's hand felt calloused against mine, why she flinched when the photographer asked for close-up shots, and why she kept apologizing for things that didn't require apologies. That night, as we sat in my study, sharing the obligatory glass of champagne, she spoke so softly I had to lean forward to hear her. "Mr. Cross Damon, I want you to know that I'll try to be a good wife to you. I know this isn't conventional, but I'll honor our agreement." The formality stung more than I expected. Victoria had been flirtatious during our meetings, confident in her beauty and its power over men. This woman sounded like she was accepting a prison sentence. "You don't need to try so hard," I said, surprising myself with the gentleness in my voice. "This is a partnership, not a performance." She was quiet for so long, I wondered if she'd left the room. Then, barely audible, "Thank you." Something was wrong. Victoria Santos was supposed to be a party girl who saw dollar signs when she looked at me. This woman sounded grateful for basic kindness, and that gratitude felt like a knife twisting in a wound I'd thought was healed. But I pushed the feeling aside. In the morning, we would settle into our new normal, and whatever strange energy I was sensing would fade into routine. After all, how different could one Santos sister be from another? I had no idea I was about to fall in love with a woman whose name I didn't even know. The morning after our wedding, I woke to the sound of someone moving quietly in the kitchen downstairs. Sarah used to sleep until noon and demand breakfast in bed. Victoria, during our brief courtship, had made jokes about having staff for menial tasks. Yet here was my new wife apparently making breakfast at 6 a.m. I made my way downstairs, navigating the familiar path through my home. The scent hit me first: real coffee, not the expensive espresso machine stuff, and something sweet baking in the oven. When I entered the kitchen, she startled so badly that something clattered to the floor. I'm so sorry, I thought you might be hungry and I found some ingredients. I can clean this up right away." "Hey." I held up a hand, confused by her panic. "It's your kitchen now too. You don't need permission to use it." A long pause. Then, "You're not angry?" The question stopped me cold. During our meetings, Victoria had been bold, almost presumptuous. She'd criticized my wine selection and suggested redecorating my living room. Now she was asking permission to exist in the space that was legally half hers. "Why would I be angry about breakfast?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. Victoria always said rich men don't like women who do domestic things, that it reminds them of... She stopped abruptly. Victoria always said. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Why was my wife talking about herself in the third person? What Victoria said and what I think are apparently very different things, I replied carefully. What are you making? It smells incredible. Just some cinnamon rolls, from scratch. I know it's probably not what you're used to, but I haven't had homemade anything in 3 years. The admission surprised me. Not in a long time. She moved closer and I caught that scent again. Vanilla and something clean, something real. Would you like some coffee? I made it strong, but I can add cream if you prefer it milder. The way she asked, hesitant but hopeful, made my chest tight. Victoria had ordered my staff around like she owned them. This woman was offering to serve me coffee like it was a gift she wasn't sure I'd accept. Strong is perfect, I said and meant it. She guided my hand to the mug, her fingers warm against mine. Careful, it's hot. I took a sip and nearly groaned with pleasure. It was perfect bold without being bitter, exactly how I liked it. How did you know how I like my coffee? We never discussed it. Another long pause. I pay attention, I guess. But that wasn't quite right. Victoria had sat through 3 dinners with me and never once asked about my preferences. She'd been too busy talking about her own needs, her own desires. This felt like someone who had been watching me, studying me, caring about getting it right. The timer chimed and she moved away to check the oven. They're ready, she said, and I heard the smile in her voice. Would you like me to bring one to the dining room or, here is fine. I felt around until I found one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. I like kitchens, they're honest rooms. Honest, you can't fake your way through cooking. Either you know what you're doing or you don't. Either you care about the result or you don't. I took another sip of the perfect coffee. This tells me you care. She set a plate in front of me, the cinnamon roll still warm from the oven. When I took a bite, it was like tasting sunlight, sweet, rich, made with the kind of attention that only comes from genuine affection for the craft. This is extraordinary, I said and heard her sharp intake of breath. You made this from memory. Victoria used to. Another abrupt stop. Yes, from memory. There it was again. That strange distance, like she was translating herself into someone else's story. But the taste in my mouth was immediate and real, the work of hands that knew their way around a kitchen that had done this countless times before. My compliments to the chef, I said softly, and was rewarded with what sounded like a genuine laugh, the first I'd heard from her. Thank you, she whispered, and in those 2 words, I heard something I'd been missing for 3 years, the sound of someone being truly happy because they'd made me happy. For the first time since the accident, I wondered if this arrangement might become something more than a business transaction. And for the first time since meeting Victoria Santos, I realized I wanted it too. We were supposed to honeymoon in Monaco, Victoria's choice, she'd said during our engagement. A place to see and be seen to announce our union to the social circles she was eager to join. But the morning we were set to leave, my wife made a request that changed everything. Would it be terrible if we went somewhere quieter instead? She asked over breakfast, her voice small and uncertain. I know we planned Monaco, but I was thinking, maybe somewhere we could just be alone without cameras and crowds. And where would you like to go? I interrupted, surprised by how much I wanted to hear her answer. There's this little coastal town in Northern California, Mendocino. I've always wanted to see it. I've heard it's beautiful. Cliffs overlooking the ocean, small bed, and breakfasts, places where you can walk for miles without seeing another soul. This wasn't the Victoria who would spend our dinner meetings talking about yacht parties and red carpet events. This sounded like someone who craved peace, not attention. Mendocino it is, I said, and the sharp gasp of surprise she made told me everything I needed to know about how often her wishes were considered. We drove up the coast in my Tesla. She insisted on driving after I mentioned the self-driving feature made me nervous since the accident. Her hands were steady on the wheel, and she narrated the scenery for me without being asked, not in the patronizing way some people did, but like she was sharing something precious. The ocean is this incredible blue-gray color, she said, her voice soft with wonder. And there are pelicans flying in formation just above the waves. Oh, and there's a lighthouse up ahead, white with a red roof sitting on this rocky outcrop, like something from a postcard. You sound like you've never seen the ocean before, I observed. Silence. Then quietly, not from this angle, not like this. The bed and breakfast she'd chosen was perfect, a Victorian house perched on bluffs overlooking the Pacific, run by an older couple who treated us like honored guests rather than celebrity curiosities. Our room had a fireplace, a claw-foot tub, and windows that she said framed the sunset like a painting. That first evening as we sat on the private deck, listening to the waves, she did something that stopped my heart. She began reading to me. "I brought a book," she said hesitantly. "I thought maybe, if you got bored, I could read aloud, only if you want." Victoria had never read anything more substantial than fashion magazines in my presence. But this woman opened what sounded like a well-worn paperback and began reading from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, her voice rich and expressive, bringing the poetry to life. On love, she read, "When love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep." I found myself leaning forward, captured not just by the words, but by the way she read them, like they meant something to her, like she'd thought about them before. This wasn't a performance. It was sharing. "You've read this before," I said when she paused. "Many times. It's one of my favorites." Victoria never mentioned being a reader. "Another one of those telling silences. People change," she said finally. "Maybe you're seeing a different side of her now." That night she ran a bath for me without being asked, testing the temperature with her elbow the way nurses do. When I mentioned being nervous about navigating the unfamiliar bathroom, she guided me with the kind of professional efficiency that spoke of experience. "You're very good at this," I said as she helped me settle into the hot water. "Good at what?" "Taking care of people. It comes naturally to you." Thank you." Her voice was thick with something I couldn't identify. "I want to take care of you, Damon. I want to be good at being your wife." The way she said it, not like a duty, but like a privilege, made something shift inside my chest. This wasn't the gold digger I'd married. This was someone who seemed to genuinely care about my comfort, my happiness, my well-being. Later that night, as we lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the ocean, she asked quietly, "Are you happy we came here instead?" "More than I expected to be," I admitted. "This feels real. Real. Like we're actually married, not just performing. Being married." She was quiet for so long, I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, barely audible, "I want this to be real, Damon. More than you could possibly know." Something in her voice, longing mixed with fear, made me reach for her hand in the darkness. She laced our fingers together and held on tight like I was an anchor in a storm I couldn't see. For the first time since the accident, I fell asleep holding someone who felt like home. The third day of our honeymoon brought the first crack in whatever facade my wife had been maintaining. We were walking the coastal trail, her describing the wildflowers and distant seals, while I navigated the uneven path with her guidance, when we encountered an elderly man who had fallen from his bicycle. "Oh my God!" she breathed, and before I could react, she was running toward him, her voice shifting into something I'd never heard before. Calm, professional, completely in control. "Sir, don't try to move yet. I'm a nurse. Let me check you for injuries first." A nurse. Victoria Santos, according to every conversation we'd had, worked part-time at a boutique and spent her evenings at gallery openings. She'd never mentioned any medical training, never shown the slightest interest in healthcare or helping others. Yet here was my wife kneeling on the rocky ground in her expensive dress, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she checked the man's pulse, examined his pupils, tested his range of motion. She spoke to him in the gentle, reassuring tone I'd heard her use with me, but now I recognized it. This was a professional caregiver voice, honed by years of experience. "You've got some scrapes and bruises, but nothing appears to be broken," she told the man. "However, I'd like you to go to the local emergency room just to be safe. You may have a mild concussion." She helped him to the nearby road, flagged down a passing car, and coordinated his transportation to the hospital, with the efficiency of someone who had done this countless times. The entire interaction took maybe 20 minutes, but it revealed more about my wife than 3 months of courtship had. "That was incredible," I said as we continued our walk. "I had no idea you were a nurse." The silence stretched so long, I wondered if she'd heard me. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and strained. Victoria never told you. Victoria mentioned working at a boutique. She talked about fashion and parties, not medicine. I stopped walking, a cold suspicion beginning to form. When did you become a nurse? She was stammering clearly, panicking. People have different sides, right? Maybe she didn't think you'd be interested in that part of her life, but I was interested desperately so. The woman who had just saved someone's afternoon with quiet competence was fascinating to me. The woman who had made me cinnamon rolls and read poetry and knew exactly how I liked my coffee. This woman was someone I wanted to know everything about. Tell me about nursing school, I said gently. When did you decide to become a nurse? She took a shaky breath. I always wanted to help people. Even as a little girl, I would bandage my dolls and pretend to take care of them. My mother used to say I had healing hands. Your mother supported your career choice. A bitter laugh. Not exactly. She thought it was a waste of time that I should focus on finding a wealthy husband instead of playing in hospitals. The honesty in her voice was devastating. This wasn't Victoria's story. Victoria had bragged about her mother's support for her social climbing. This sounded like someone who had fought for her calling against family opposition. How long have you been practicing? I asked. 5 years. I work in pediatric oncology. Her voice grew stronger as she talked about her work. Children with cancer, it's heartbreaking, but also, there's nothing more beautiful than seeing a child beat the odds, seeing their families whole again. Pediatric oncology, the most emotionally demanding field in nursing, requiring not just medical skill, but extraordinary emotional strength. This was not the career of someone who saw people as meal tickets. That must be incredibly difficult, I said softly. It is, but it's also the most important thing I've ever done. Those children, they teach you what matters and what doesn't. They show you that love is the only thing that really... She stopped abruptly like she'd said too much. The only thing that really what matters, she whispered. Love is the only thing that really matters. We walked in silence for a while, and I felt pieces of a puzzle shifting in my mind. The gentleness, the natural caregiving, the way she seemed to anticipate my needs, these weren't the behaviors of a gold digger. These were the instincts of someone whose life's work was caring for others. That evening, as she helped me navigate the unfamiliar shower in our room, her hands were professional but tender, and I found myself wondering, who are you really, Victoria? I said softly as she handed me a towel. She froze. Yes. I'm glad you became a nurse. I'm glad you followed your heart instead of your mother's advice. The sound she made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. You are. The world needs more people like you, people who choose to heal instead of harm. She was quiet for a long moment, then, thank you, Damon. That means more to me than you could possibly know. But it was what she didn't say that haunted me as I fell asleep that night. She hadn't sounded like someone receiving a compliment about herself. She'd sounded like someone who had never expected to be seen, much less valued, for who she truly was. And I was beginning to suspect that the woman I was falling in love with wasn't Victoria Santos at all. By our last day in Mendocino, I was in love with my wife. Not the woman I thought I'd married, but whoever she actually was. The revelation should have disturbed me more than it did. Instead, lying in our bed, listening to her soft breathing, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before the accident hope. Are you awake? She whispered in the pre-dawn darkness. I couldn't sleep. She shifted beside me and I felt the warmth of her hand near mine on the pillow. Damon, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if the accident hadn't happened? The question caught me off guard. Most people avoided mentioning my blindness, treating it like a shameful secret. But she asked with the directness of someone who worked with pain professionally, not tiptoeing around it, but acknowledging it as part of the landscape. Every day for the first year, I admitted. Less now, but yes. Do you ever wonder about alternate versions of your life all the time? Her voice was thick with something I couldn't identify. I wonder what would have happened if I'd been braver, if I'd made different choices. What would you have chosen differently? A long pause. I would have told the truth from the beginning, even if it cost me everything. Something in her tone made my chest tight. What truth? But she was already pulling away emotionally, if not physically. Nothing specific, just general regrets, I didn't know, but I sensed pressing would only make her retreat further. Instead, I reached for her hand in the darkness, found it, held it gently. "For what it's worth," I said, "I'm grateful for the choices that brought you here, whatever they were." Her fingers tightened around mine. "Even though this isn't how you imagined your life, especially because of that." The honesty surprised me. I thought I knew what I wanted: a simple arrangement, no complications, no emotions. But this week, being with you, it's made me realize I was wrong about what I needed. "What do you need?" she asked so quietly I almost missed it. Someone who sees me as more than my bank account or my disability. Someone who makes cinnamon rolls at dawn and reads poetry and knows how to make a scared man feel safe. I turned toward her in the darkness. "Someone exactly like you." The sound she made was definitely a sob this time. "Damon, I know this isn't what we agreed to." I continued, my heart pounding. "I know you married me for financial security, and I have no right to ask for more. But I have to tell you, I'm falling in love with you, with your kindness, your strength, the way you take care of people without expecting anything in return. I'm falling in love with who you are when you think no one is watching." She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. "You don't understand? Then help me understand." I sat up, reached for her face in the darkness, found tears on her cheeks. "Talk to me. Tell me what's wrong." "I can't." The words were barely audible. "If I tell you, you'll hate me." "That's impossible." "It's not. Trust me, it's not." The pain in her voice was like a physical blow. Whatever secret she was carrying, it was destroying her. And somehow my confession of love had made it worse. "Listen to me," I said, wiping tears from her face with my thumbs. "I don't know what you think you've done, but nothing could make me hate you. You're the kindest person I've ever met. You've brought light back into my life when I thought I'd lost it forever." "I'm not who you think I am," she whispered. "Then tell me who you are. Let me love the real you instead of whatever version you think I want." But she was already pulling away, already retreating behind whatever walls she'd built to protect herself. "We should pack," she said, her voice artificially bright. "The car service will be here soon." I wanted to push, to demand answers, to tear down whatever barriers stood between us and honesty. But the nurse in her had taught me something about pain. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do was give someone space to hurt without making it worse. So I let her go, even though it felt like losing something precious. But as we packed in silence, I made a decision. Whatever secret she was hiding, whatever truth she thought would destroy us, I would find a way to show her it didn't matter. Because for the first time in 3 years, I had something worth fighting for. I was in love with a woman whose real name I didn't even know, and somehow that felt like the most honest thing that had happened to me since the accident. The drive home was quiet, but I spent every mile planning how to prove to her that love could survive truth, that whatever she was hiding couldn't be worse than the loneliness we'd both been living with. I had no idea how wrong I was about to be proven. We'd been home from our honeymoon for exactly 6 days when Rosa Santos arrived unannounced at our front door. I was in my study reviewing quarterly reports with Ethan when our housekeeper announced we had a visitor. "Mrs. Santos is here to see you both," Maria said, her voice carefully neutral in the way that suggested she'd already formed an opinion about our unexpected guest. My wife had been in the garden. I could hear her moving around out there, probably tending to the herb garden she'd started without asking permission. The sound of her footsteps on the hardwood floors as she came inside was hurried, almost panicked. "Mama," she said, breathless. "What are you doing here? Can't a mother visit her daughter?" Rosa's voice was bright and artificial, the kind of cheer that masked desperation, especially after such a beautiful wedding. I wanted to see how Victoria is settling into married life. Victoria. The name hung in the air like a lie, and I felt my wife's tension from across the room. "Perhaps I should give you privacy for your family visit," Ethan suggested quietly. "No need," Rosa said quickly. "We're all family now, aren't we? Besides, I brought some things for Victoria: photo albums, childhood mementos, things I thought she might want in her new home." "That's very thoughtful," I said carefully. But something felt wrong. My wife hadn't moved or spoken since her initial greeting, and the silence was stretching uncomfortably. "Oh, and I brought some of Elena's nursing textbooks," Rosa continued cheerfully. I know how much she loved studying medicine, and I thought, Mama. My wife's voice was sharp warning. I mean Victoria's textbooks, of course. Sometimes I get my daughters confused, you know how mothers are. Rosa laughed, but it sounded forced. They're so similar in some ways. Elena. The name registered like a gunshot. Elena's nursing textbooks. Elena, who loved studying medicine. I didn't realize Victoria had a sister named Elena, I said slowly. Oh yes, my Elena is Victoria's younger sister. She's a nurse, you know, works with sick children. Such a sweet girl, but not nearly as beautiful as Victoria, of course. Not the kind of girl who could catch a millionaire's eye. The room went dead silent. I could hear my wife's rapid breathing, could practically feel the panic radiating off her. Where is Elena now? I asked, my voice carefully controlled. Oh, she's away, working, very dedicated to her job. Sometimes I don't see her for weeks at a time. Rosa's voice was getting higher, more strained. She sacrifices so much for others, that girl, always putting everyone else's needs before her own. How admirable, I said quietly. I'd like to meet her sometime. That might be difficult. She's very shy around rich people. Gets nervous, you know, not like Victoria, who's always been comfortable in high society. But the woman I'd married, the woman who'd panicked about making breakfast, who'd asked permission to exist in her own home, who'd been terrified of photographers at our wedding, that wasn't someone comfortable in high society. That was someone who'd learned to be invisible, to serve others, to sacrifice her own needs. Mama, perhaps you should go, my wife said, her voice barely controlled. I'm sure Damon has work to do. Nonsense, I want to hear all about the honeymoon. Did you visit those fancy places Victoria always dreamed about? The expensive restaurants, the luxury hotels. We went to Mendocino, I said, watching carefully for Rosa's reaction. Mendocino. The confusion in her voice was genuine. But Victoria always said she wanted to go to Monaco or Paris or... I changed my mind, my wife interrupted quickly. I wanted somewhere quieter. But honey, you've never been quiet a day in your life. You've always loved attention, loved being seen. People change, Mama. Today, Rosa sounded genuinely puzzled. Because you sound just like Elena right now. She always preferred quiet places, always wanted to help people instead of, I think you should leave. My wife's voice was shaking now. Please. The desperation in her tone broke something open in my chest. This wasn't the behavior of a woman uncomfortable with her mother's visit. This was someone terrified of being exposed. Of course, darling, but first let me give you these photos. I heard rustling papers being shuffled. Look, here's one from your birthday last year. Oh wait, that's Elena in her nursing uniform. And here's... No, that's Elena too. Where are the photos of Victoria? She's usually in front of every camera. Mama, please. Oh, here's one of both my girls together. You can see how different they look, Victoria with her long hair and designer clothes. Elena with that simple ponytail she always wears. People used to say Elena was the prettier one, but Victoria knew how to make the most of what she had. The photo exchange happened in silence, but I could feel my wife's distress, like a physical presence in the room. Well, Rosa said finally, I should let you two get back to your new life together. Victoria dear, call your mother more often, and tell Elena I said hello when you see her. After Rosa left the house, felt like it was holding its breath. My wife hadn't moved from where she'd been standing, and I could hear her quiet crying. Elena, I said softly. The crying stopped abruptly. Your name is Elena, isn't it? A long shuddering breath, then barely audible, yes. The truth hit me like ice water. I wasn't married to Victoria Santos, the gold-digging party girl I'd agreed to a business arrangement with. I was married to Elena Santos, the nurse who made cinnamon rolls and read poetry and dedicated her life to healing children. I was in love with a woman who'd been lying to me from the moment we met. And suddenly everything made perfect, devastating sense. How long were you planning to lie to me? The question came out harsher than I'd intended, but 3 days of silence since Rosa's visit had pushed me past the point of diplomatic conversation. Elena and God, even thinking her real name felt like discovering a different person, was sitting across from me at the breakfast table, and I could feel her tension like electricity in the air. Damon, please. How long? I repeated. Until I died, until we had children who might slip up and call you by your real name, or were you just going to keep pretending to be your sister forever? It wasn't supposed to be forever. Her voice was small, defeated. It was supposed to be temporary. Victoria was supposed to come back after the wedding and what you were going to disappear. Let me think I'd been married to Victoria all along. I don't know. The words exploded out of her. I don't know what the plan was, okay. There was no plan. Victoria left, my family was going to lose everything, and suddenly I was standing in a wedding dress being told to save everyone. I never meant for this to happen. For what to happen? The lying, or I stopped myself before saying, falling in love. But she heard it anyway. Both, she whispered. Neither. I don't know anymore. I stood up, began pacing, a habit I'd developed since losing my sight, moving, helping me think. Do you have any idea what this means? I've been telling you I love you, sharing my most private thoughts, and you've been what? Laughing at how easily you fooled the blind man. No. She was on her feet now too, her voice fierce. Don't you dare think that. Everything I felt, everything between us that's been real, that's been me, Elena, not some performance. How can I believe anything you say now? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. You can't, and I don't blame you. Something in her tone, defeat, mixed with relief, like someone finally laying down a burden too heavy to carry, made me stop pacing. Elena. Her real name felt strange on my tongue. Why didn't Victoria come to the wedding? She met someone else, a tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, younger than you and sighted. She said she couldn't go through with marrying someone who couldn't appreciate her beauty. The casual cruelty of it stung, but not as much as it might have a week ago. And your family forced you to take her place. My mother said if I didn't, we'd lose the house. She'd lose her medical coverage, and my father's care facility would discharge him. She said Victoria's happiness was worth more than our family's survival. And you believe that? I'm a nurse, Damon. I see what happens to families when they can't afford medical care. I couldn't let my father die or my mother become homeless just because Victoria decided to chase someone else. The selflessness of it was staggering and infuriating at the same time. She'd sacrificed her entire identity to save people who'd apparently never considered her feelings worth protecting. So you married me under false pretenses to save your family, I said slowly. And then what, you were just going to suffer through it? I thought so, yes. I thought I could pretend to be Victoria, give you what you wanted from the arrangement, and everyone would be satisfied. What changed? Another long pause, then so quietly I almost missed it. You. Me. You were nothing like what Victoria said you'd be. She said you were cold, demanding that you'd treat me like staff. But you were kind. You thanked me for breakfast and asked about my dreams and made me feel like I mattered. And when you said you were falling in love with me, she took a shuddering breath. I realized the woman you were falling in love with was me, Elena, not Victoria. And that terrified me because I was falling in love with you too. The confession hung between us, honest and devastating. But you still kept lying. Because I knew if you found out the truth, you'd hate me, and I'd rather have you love a lie than hate the real me. The pain in her voice was unbearable, but my anger was stronger. You didn't give me the choice. No, I didn't, and I'm sorry. More sorry than you'll ever know. I resumed, pacing, my mind racing. The woman I'd fallen in love with was real, Elena was real. But she'd built our entire relationship on deception, and I didn't know how to reconcile those two truths. That's when Ethan knocked on the dining room door. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, but Dr. Pierce is on the phone. He says it's urgent. Dr. Nathan Pierce, the experimental eye surgeon who'd been trying to convince me to attempt vision restoration surgery for 2 years. Tell him I'll call back, I said, but Elena spoke at the same time. Take it, please. Something in her voice made me pause. Why? Because maybe if you could see, you'd understand. You'd see who I really am, not just who you think I am. The irony was crushing. She wanted me to regain my sight so I could see her clearly, not realizing that seeing her would mean discovering her deception in the most literal way possible. Dr. Pierce, I said when Ethan transferred the call. What's so urgent? Damon, I've had a breakthrough. A new technique that could restore significant vision in patients with your type of injury. But there's a window we'd need to operate within the next 2 weeks for optimal results. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to decide whether to undergo risky surgery that might give me back my sight but would definitely show me the face of the woman who'd been lying to me for months. I need time to think about it, I said. Of course, but Damon, this might be your only chance. After I hung up, Elena and I sat in silence. Finally, she spoke. You should do it, even though it means you can't hide anymore, especially because of that. Her voice was steady, now resolved. If you're going to hate me, it should be for who I really am, not for who you think I am. And that's when I realized that Elena Santos' nurse, caregiver woman who'd sacrificed everything for others was braver than anyone who'd ever been in my life. Even if I wasn't sure I could forgive her, I knew I had to see her face. The night before my surgery, Elena couldn't sleep. I could hear her moving restlessly beside me, the sheets rustling every few minutes as she shifted position. At 2 a.m., she finally gave up the pretense. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know I'm keeping you awake. I wasn't sleeping either. I turned toward her in the darkness, maybe the last time darkness would be all I knew. Nervous? Terrified, she admitted. Are you... About the surgery, no. About what comes after, I paused. Yes. We lay in silence for a while, and I found myself memorizing the sound of her breathing, the way she smelled like vanilla, and something uniquely her. Tomorrow I might be able to see her face, but I would also have to confront the visual proof of her deception. Damon. Her voice was tentative. Can I tell you something? Anything. I want you to know what really happened. The whole truth, not just the pieces you've figured out. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I nodded. Victoria left 3 days before the wedding, she began. She didn't tell anyone, just disappeared with her new boyfriend. My mother found out when the hotel called looking for her because she'd missed the final dress fitting. Where were you? At the hospital. I'd just finished a double shift in pediatric oncology. My mother called me in hysterics, saying our family was ruined, that we'd have to return your engagement gifts and pay penalties we couldn't afford. She said you'd probably sue us for breach of contract. The thought hadn't even occurred to me, but I could see how it would terrify them. She begged me to come home, said we needed to figure out what to do. When I got there, she had Victoria's wedding dress laid out on my bed. She asked you to replace her. She told me to replace her. She said Victoria and I looked similar enough that you wouldn't know the difference because you couldn't see anyway. She said it was just for the wedding ceremony and maybe a few months until Victoria came to her senses and came back. The casual cruelty of it, reducing my blindness to a convenience for their deception, made my jaw clench. I said no, of course. I said it was insane illegal, that you deserved better. But then she showed me the medical bills. Elena's voice grew thick with remembered emotion. My father has Alzheimer's and he's in a specialized care facility that costs $8,000 a month. My mother has diabetes and hasn't been able to afford her medication in 6 months. The house has been in foreclosure for a year, and I've been working double shifts and sending them everything I can, but it's not enough. It's never enough. So you agreed. I spent the night before our wedding crying and trying to figure out any other solution. I thought about asking you directly for help, but we'd never met. I thought about taking out more loans, but I was already maxed out. I thought about selling everything I owned, but it would have bought maybe another month. She took a shuddering breath. That morning when I put on Victoria's wedding dress, I told myself it would be temporary, just long enough to make sure the financial arrangements were in place, and then I'd find a way to disappear and let you think Victoria had left you. It never occurred to me that we might fall in love. I never believed anyone could love me for myself. Victoria always said I was too plain, too boring, too focused on work. She said men want excitement, glamour, beauty things I've never had. The pain in her voice was devastating. Elena, but then you married me and you were kind. You thanked me for making breakfast like it was a gift instead of an obligation. You listened when I read to you. You told me I was extraordinary. Her voice broke. And for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I was worth loving. You are worth loving, but not like this, not built on lies. She turned toward me in the darkness, and I felt her hand brush against mine. That's why I want you to have the surgery. Because if there's any chance we could have something real, it has to start with the truth. All of it. Even if the truth is that I can't forgive you. Even then. Her voice was steady now. You deserve to make that choice with all the information. You deserve to see who you're really married to. I found her hand in the darkness, laced our fingers together. What if I can see you tomorrow and I realize I don't know you at all? Then you'll know you married a stranger who loves you more than she's ever loved anything in her life. The simplicity of it, the absolute honesty, broke something open in my chest. Elena, yes. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever I see or don't see, I want you to know these past few weeks with you have been the happiest I've been since before the accident. The woman who made me cinnamon rolls and read poetry and took care of that man on the trail, that woman is extraordinary. And I don't care what name she goes by. She was crying now, I could hear it. You might feel differently when you can see my face. Why, what's wrong with your face? Nothing's wrong with it. It's just not Victoria's. And there it was, the heart of her fear. Not that I'd hate her for lying, but that I'd find her physically lacking compared to the sister who'd abandoned me. Elena, I said softly, I fell in love with your voice, your kindness, your strength. I fell in love with the way you take care of people and the way you make me feel safe. Your face could never change that. Promise me, she whispered. Promise you what? Promise me that tomorrow when you can see me, you'll remember this moment. Remember that the woman lying here loving you in the darkness is the same woman you'll see in the light. I brought her hand to my lips, kissed her knuckles gently. I promise. We fell asleep holding hands, and I dreamed of light, not just the ability to see, but the brightness that came from finally understanding that love wasn't about perfection or honesty or even trust. Sometimes love was about two broken people deciding to be brave enough to heal together. But first I had to see her face. The bandages are coming off now, Mr. Cross. Take it slow, your eyes will be sensitive to light at first. Dr. Pierce's voice seemed to come from very far away as he carefully unwound the gauze that had covered my eyes for 3 days post-surgery. Elena was holding my hand, her fingers trembling against mine. Remember, she whispered, whatever you see, I love you. The last of the bandages fell away and Dr. Pierce shined a small penlight into my left eye, then my right. For a moment there was nothing but overwhelming brightness and blurred shapes. Then slowly, the world came into focus. The first thing I saw was Dr. Pierce's face lined kind, exactly as I'd imagined from his voice. He was smiling. How do you feel? He asked. Like I'm seeing magic, I whispered, and it was true. 3 years of darkness, and now there was light-colored depth dimension. I turned my head slowly, taking in the hospital room, the machines, the window showing blue sky beyond. And then I looked at my wife. The woman sitting beside my bed had dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, warm brown eyes red from recent crying, and a face that was beautiful. Not classically, not in the dramatic way that stopped traffic, but beautiful in the way that sunrise is beautiful, or the sound of rain on windows. She was beautiful like home, but she wasn't Victoria Santos. I knew this immediately, even though I'd never seen Victoria's face. This woman was younger, softer, with an openness in her expression that spoke of someone who'd spent her life caring for others. This was the face of someone who worried about whether she'd made your coffee too strong, who read poetry aloud because she thought you might be bored, who stayed up all night with sick children because they needed an extra dose of love. This was Elena. Hello, I said softly and watched her face crumple. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. But I wasn't angry. Looking at her, really seeing her for the first time, all I felt was a profound sense of rightness. This was the face that belonged to the voice that had been reading me to sleep. These were the hands that had guided me safely through unfamiliar places. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with, and seeing her only confirmed what my heart had already known. You're beautiful, I said, and meant it completely. Her eyes widened with shock. What? You're exactly what I expected you to look like. But I'm not Victoria. I'm not who you married. No, I agreed, sitting up in the hospital bed, never taking my eyes off her face. You're better. Dr. Pierce cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps I should give you two some privacy. The surgery was a complete success, Mr. Cross. You should regain full vision over the next few days. After he left, Elena and I stared at each other. She looked terrified, like she was waiting for me to explode with rage or demand an annulment. Instead, I reached for her face, cupping her cheek in my palm. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" I asked. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I see the woman who sacrificed everything to save her family. I see someone who chose to become a nurse because she wanted to heal people even when her own mother told her it was worthless. I see the person who made a scared, bitter man remember what it felt like to be loved. You see a liar," she said firmly. "You see someone who deceived you from the moment we met." "Yes," I admitted. "I do see that too, and it hurts, Elena. It hurts that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was afraid you'd send me away. Maybe I would have at first, but maybe I would have seen what I see now that Elena Santos is worth 10 of her sister. That the woman who reads Khalil Gibran and makes perfect cinnamon rolls and knows exactly how to comfort a stranger in pain is exactly who I want to spend my life with. Even though I lied to you, I considered this seriously. The lying stops now, completely. No more secrets, no more pretending to be someone you're not. Can you promise me that?" "Yes," she said immediately. "God, yes. I never want to lie to you again." Then we figure out how to move forward, together. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You still want to be married to me?" "Elena, I fell in love with you when I thought you were someone else entirely. Now that I know who you really are, someone brave enough to sacrifice her own happiness for her family, someone dedicated enough to spend her life caring for sick children, someone honest enough to encourage me to have surgery. Even though she knew it would expose her secret, how could I not want to be married to you? But the deception was wrong. I finished. And it hurt. But it doesn't change who you are underneath. It doesn't change the fact that you've made me happier in 2 months than I've been in 3 years." I stood up slowly, still adjusting to having my vision back, and moved to stand in front of her chair. She looked up at me with wonder and fear and hope all mixed together. "My name is Damon Cross," I said formally. "I'm 32 years old, I run several tech companies, and I just regained my sight after 3 years of blindness. I'm also completely in love with a nurse named Elena Santos, and I'd very much like to stay married to her if she'll have me." She stood up too, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked me directly in the eyes without flinching. "My name is Elena Santos," she said, her voice getting stronger with each word. "I'm 28 years old, I work in pediatric oncology, and I sacrificed my identity to save my family. I'm also completely in love with a man named Damon Cross, and I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of his forgiveness." "You already have," I said, and kissed her. When we broke apart, I could see her clearly, not just her face, but her soul. And what I saw there was everything I'd ever wanted: love without conditions, strength without hardness, beauty that came from who she was, rather than what she looked like. "Come on," I said, taking her hand. "Let's go home and start over, properly, this time." "Damon, yes, I love you. The real me loves the real you, and that's never been a lie." Looking into her eyes, finally able to see the truth there, I believed her completely. We'd been home from the hospital for exactly 1 week when Victoria Santos walked through our front door like she owned the place. I was in the kitchen with Elena, watching her make breakfast and marveling at being able to see her graceful movements when the front door slammed open without so much as a knock. Elena froze a spatula halfway to the pan, her face going pale. "Honey, I'm home," a voice called out, bright, confident, nothing like Elena's gentle tones. And then Victoria Santos strutted into our kitchen like she was walking a runway. The contrast between the sisters was immediate and striking. Where Elena was understated, beauty, soft brown hair, warm eyes, simple clothes that suggested someone more interested in comfort than display, Victoria was all artifice and ambition. Platinum blonde hair in perfect waves, makeup applied with professional precision, a designer dress that probably cost more than Elena made in a month. She was conventionally gorgeous in the way that magazines and movies taught men to want, but there was something calculated about it, something that felt like a performance even in this private moment. "Damon." She practically purred my name, moving toward me with practiced sensuality. "Look at you. You can see again, and you look even more handsome than I remembered." Elena stepped protectively in front of me, still holding the spatula like a weapon. Victoria, what are you doing here? What do you think I'm doing here? Victoria laughed, a sound like expensive champagne being poured. I heard about the surgery, about Damon's miraculous recovery, and I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. I came back for my husband. Your husband? Elena's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. Oh, don't be dramatic, Elena. You've been keeping him warm for me, and I appreciate that, really. But let's be honest, you were always just the substitute. Now that Damon can see again, he deserves to be with the woman he actually married. The casual cruelty was breathtaking. Victoria spoke about Elena like she was hired to help someone who could be dismissed now that her services were no longer needed. Actually, I said, stepping forward, I married Elena, the woman standing right here. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. Technically, darling, you married Victoria Santos. The name on the marriage certificate is mine, the social security number is mine, and legally speaking, Elena has been impersonating me for months. I could have her arrested for fraud if I wanted to. I felt Elena flinch beside me, but I kept my voice calm. What do you want, Victoria? What I've always wanted, to be married to a billionaire tech mogul who can now appreciate how lucky he is. She moved closer, her perfume overwhelming after weeks of Elena's subtle vanilla scent. I know you've grown fond of Elena, and that's sweet really, but now that you can see, surely you understand the difference between us. She gestured to herself, then dismissively toward Elena. I mean, look at her, sweet little nurse Elena in her practical clothes and sensible shoes. And look at me, everything a successful man deserves in a wife. Beauty, sophistication, the kind of woman who can hold her own at charity galas and board meetings. You're right, I said quietly. There is a difference between you. Victoria smiled triumphantly, but Elena made a small wounded sound. The difference, I continued, is that Elena has never once asked me what I could give her. She's only asked what she could give me. You, on the other hand, led with a price list. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. I don't know what Elena has told you, but she's told me the truth. Finally, all of it. I moved to stand beside Elena, taking her hand, including the part about why she had to replace you at our wedding. I had to explore my options, Victoria said defensively. A woman has to think about her future. By abandoning your family when they needed you most. My family's problems aren't my responsibility. I didn't rack up gambling debts or refuse to buy health insurance. Why should I sacrifice my happiness for their mistakes? The selfishness was staggering, but what struck me most was how different the sisters were. Elena had sacrificed everything for family. Victoria wouldn't sacrifice anything for anyone. Besides, Victoria continued, apparently unaware of how badly she was presenting herself. That Silicon Valley startup boy turned out to be all talk and no money. His revolutionary app crashed and burned, and suddenly he couldn't afford to keep me in the lifestyle I deserve. So here I am, ready to honor our original agreement. Our original agreement was for you to marry me, I pointed out. You broke that agreement when you ran off with someone else. A temporary lapse in judgment, but I'm here now and I'm willing to forgive your little dalliance with my sister. We can start fresh. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended, but Victoria's casual dismissal of Elena as a dalliance had ignited something protective and furious in my chest. Excuse me. I said no. I'm not interested in starting fresh with you, Victoria. I'm interested in continuing what I've built with Elena. Victoria's perfect composure cracked. You can't be serious. She's a nobody, a nurse who makes $30,000 a year and has never been anywhere more exotic than the local mall. I'm offering you sophistication, beauty, a wife you can be proud of in public. I am proud of Elena. She saves children's lives for a living. She sacrificed her own happiness to protect her family. She's kind and genuine, and she loves me, not my bank account, not my social status, not what I can buy her. Me. She lied to you. To protect her family, you lied to protect yourself. There's a difference. Victoria's mask was slipping completely, now revealing something ugly underneath. Fine, you want to throw away everything for some pathetic little mouse, go ahead. But you should know I'll be contesting the marriage. Legally, you're married to me, not her. I'll take half of everything you own. Actually, Elena said quietly, speaking for the first time since Victoria's arrival, you won't. Both Victoria and I turned to look at her. What are you talking about? Victoria demanded. Elena pulled a folder from the kitchen counter, one I hadn't noticed before. I've been working with a lawyer since Damon's surgery. The marriage certificate may have Victoria's name on it, but the woman who signed it was me. I signed my own name on the actual document. Victoria snatched the folder, scanning the papers inside. Her face went white. This means, Elena continued, that legally Damon is married to Elena Santos, not Victoria Santos. Identity fraud would be if I'd signed your name, but I didn't. I signed my own. That's impossible. The officiant asked if I was taking Damon as my husband, and I said yes. He asked for my signature, and I signed Elena Santos. No one asked me to confirm that I was Victoria. I stared at Elena in amazement. She'd been protecting us both even then, even in the midst of the deception. Victoria looked between us, her carefully constructed world crumbling. This isn't over. I'll find another way. You leave, I said firmly. You leave and you won't come back. Because if you try to cause problems for Elena or her family, I'll make sure everyone in your social circle knows exactly why you abandoned your wedding and what you tried to do when you came back. Victoria's face twisted with rage and humiliation. You'll regret this, both of you. When you get bored of playing house with your little nursemaid, when you realize what you gave up, I'll remember that I chose love over convenience, I interrupted, and I'll be grateful every single day. After Victoria stormed out, Elena and I stood in the quiet kitchen holding hands. Did you really sign your own name on our marriage certificate? I asked. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I couldn't bring myself to forge her signature. It felt like one lie too many. So we really are married. Elena and Damon, not Victoria and Damon, if you want to be. I pulled her into my arms, marveling again at being able to see her beautiful, honest face. Elena Santos Cross, I said. I like the sound of that. Even after everything, even after meeting Victoria and seeing what you could have had instead. I kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Especially after that, because now I know exactly how lucky I am. 2 days after Victoria's dramatic exit, Ethan knocked on my study door with an expression I'd learned to recognize as trouble. We need to talk, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, about Victoria Santos and what she's been up to since she left. Elena was curled up in the reading chair by the window, and I saw her tense at Victoria's name. We'd been trying to put the confrontation behind us, but apparently Victoria wasn't done with us yet. What did you find? I asked, because I'd asked Ethan to do some digging after Victoria's threats about contesting our marriage. It's not what she's doing now that's interesting, Ethan said, pulling out a tablet. It's what she was doing before, starting about 6 months before your original wedding date. He handed me the device and I scrolled through what appeared to be a private investigation report. Elena got up and came to read over my shoulder, her intake of breath sharp as we processed the information together. She was seeing the Silicon Valley guy for 4 months before she left, Elena whispered. Marcus Chen, Ethan confirmed. 28 started a cryptocurrency exchange that was doing well at the time. But here's the interesting part, she wasn't just seeing him. She was actively planning to leave Damon for him, but only after the wedding. What do you mean? I asked, though a cold suspicion was already forming. According to Chen's friends, and he was apparently very open about this, Victoria's plan was to marry you, establish legal claim to half your assets, then divorce you within a year to be with him. She figured a year of marriage would be enough to secure a significant settlement, especially given your wealth. The calculated nature of it was breathtaking, so when she disappeared before the wedding, she panicked when Chen's business started taking off faster than expected. She thought she could skip the marriage part and go straight to the tech fortune, except Chen's company crashed 3 months later, taking all his money with it. Elena sank back into her chair. So she came back because her backup plan failed. Exactly, and there's more. Ethan pulled up another screen. She's been telling people, including Chen, that she's been married to you this whole time. She's been using your name and reputation to maintain her lifestyle, running up credit in your name, telling everyone she's Mrs. Damon Cross. What? I was on my feet, now furious. Hotels, restaurants, boutiques, she's been charging everything to accounts she claimed were connected to your estate. When vendors called to verify, she told them she was your wife handling your affairs while you recovered from surgery. Elena looked sick. She's been impersonating me, impersonating her. It gets worse, Ethan continued grimly. She's been telling people that Elena is the family maid who's been caring for you during your recovery. She's painted herself as the devoted wife, sacrificing her social life to ensure her husband gets the best care. The cruelty was staggering. Victoria had stolen Elena's identity, claimed credit for Elena's devotion, and reduced Elena herself to hired help in the story she was telling the world. How much does she owe? I asked. About 200,000 so far, and that's just what I could track down easily. Elena made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. The amount of money she spent pretending to be married to you is more than my family's entire debt. There's something else, Ethan said quietly. I think you need to see this. He pulled up what appeared to be a social media post, Victoria in an expensive restaurant champagne glass, raised to the camera hashtags proclaiming, "Billionaire's wife, living my best life, luckiest girl." But it was the caption that made my blood run cold, missing my darling husband while he recovers from his surgery, but so grateful for all the support from friends during this difficult time. Damon is so lucky to have such devoted care from our household staff, especially our sweet maid Elena, who's been absolutely wonderful. Looking forward to celebrating his recovery properly. Racha, blessed Ejam power couple. She's been fundraising, Elena said, her voice hollow with realization. She's been accepting money from people who think they're helping us through a difficult time. Charity donations, yes, but also investments. Ethan's expression was grim. She's been telling people you're starting a new company focused on accessibility technology inspired by your experience with blindness. She's collected almost $500,000 in seed funding from investors who think they're getting in on the ground floor of your next venture. I stared at the screen, watching my wife, my real wife, process the full scope of her sister's betrayal. Victoria hadn't just abandoned Elena to save their family. She'd actively stolen Elena's identity and sacrifice to fund her own lifestyle. We have to stop her, Elena said quietly. Already on it, Ethan replied. I've contacted all the vendors and creditors, explained the situation, provided them with documentation of the real marriage certificate, showing Elena as your actual wife. Most of them are willing to work with us on the fraudulent charges. What about the investors? That's trickier. She's technically committed securities fraud by soliciting investments for a non-existent company using false pretenses. But pursuing charges would mean a very public court case, I finished, which would expose Elena's original deception. Ethan confirmed. It's a legal mess that could take years to sort out and would probably hurt Elena more than Victoria in the long run. Elena stood up abruptly. No. Elena, I started. No, she repeated stronger this time. I won't let her destroy other people's lives just to protect myself from embarrassment. Those investors trusted her because they thought she was helping you. They don't deserve to lose their money because I was too much of a coward to tell the truth from the beginning. You weren't a coward, I said firmly. You were protecting your family. And now I need to protect innocent people from my sister's greed. She turned to Ethan. Set up a meeting with the investors. All of them. I'll explain what really happened and we'll return their money. Elena, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She looked at me with fierce determination. Victoria has spent months living off my sacrifice while painting me as the help. She's stolen my identity, my story, my marriage, and used it all to fund her lifestyle while real people suffer. Someone has to stop her. We'll do it together, I said, taking her hand. All of it. The investors, the creditors, the legal mess, we'll handle it together. Even though it means everyone will know the truth about how we got married, especially because of that. The truth is that I'm married to an extraordinary woman who put her family's needs before her own happiness. The truth is that Elena Santos saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with money or status. I'm not ashamed of that story, Elena. I'm proud of it. She smiled through her tears. Even if it gets messy. Love is messy, I said, pulling her into my arms. But it's also brave, and we're going to be brave together. Over her shoulder, I could see Ethan making notes, already planning how to untangle Victoria's web of lies. But what struck me most was how completely Victoria had misjudged both Elena and me. She'd assumed Elena would stay hidden and ashamed, that I would prioritize reputation over truth, that money and social standing mattered more than genuine love. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been about all of it. The investor meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday in the conference room of my downtown office. Elena had spent 3 days preparing, writing and rewriting her statement, practicing how to explain the impossible tangle of truth and deception that had brought us to this point. "You don't have to do this," I told her for the 100th time as we rode the elevator up to the 42nd floor. "Yes, I do," she replied, straightening her shoulders. She was wearing a simple navy dress, professional but not pretentious. The kind of outfit that said she took this seriously, but wasn't trying to be someone she wasn't. These people deserve the truth. The conference room was full when we arrived, 12 investors who had collectively given Victoria nearly $500,000 based on her lies. They ranged from tech entrepreneurs to philanthropists, all successful people who had trusted the wrong person with their money. Elena stood at the head of the table, her hands clasped to keep them from shaking, and began to speak. "My name is Elena Santos Cross, and I need to tell you a story about love deception and the difference between the two." For the next 20 minutes, she laid out everything: Victoria's abandonment, the forced substitution, the months of living under a false identity, my surgery, and the revelation of truth, Victoria's return and fraudulent activities. She spoke clearly and honestly, taking responsibility for her part in the deception, while making it clear that she'd never asked for or benefited from Victoria's fraud. "I know this sounds impossible," she concluded. "I know it's the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about trust and honesty. But I'm telling you because you deserved better than Victoria's lies, and because the people Victoria hurt deserve justice." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Margaret Chen, a tech investor in her 60s, spoke up. "Let me see if I understand this correctly. You agreed to an arranged marriage to save your family from financial ruin, fell in love with your husband while pretending to be your sister, and are now exposing yourself to legal liability to make sure we get our money back." "Yes," Elena said simply. "And you," Margaret turned to me, "regained your sight, discovered your wife was not who you thought she was, and decided to stay married to her anyway." "Best decision I ever made," I replied. Margaret smiled. "That's either the most romantic story I've ever heard or the most elaborate con in history." "It's romantic," said James Liu, another investor. "I've been married 30 years and I can tell you love isn't about perfect honesty from day one. It's about choosing each other even when things get complicated." "The question is," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, "what happens to Victoria? She's committed securities fraud, identity theft, and wire fraud. Are we pressing charges?" Elena and I exchanged glances. We discussed this extensively. "We're leaving that up to all of you," I said. "Elena and I will cooperate fully with whatever decision you make, but I want you to know we're returning every penny she took with interest, regardless of what legal action you choose to pursue." "Even though you're not legally responsible for her actions?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Especially because we're not legally responsible," Elena said. "This isn't about legal obligation. It's about moral obligation. Victoria used my name, my marriage, my story to defraud you. That makes it my responsibility to fix it." Thomas Wong, a young entrepreneur, leaned forward. "Can I ask you something personal?" Elena nodded. "Do you love him? Really love him? Not just grateful for the rescue love?" Elena's face softened as she looked at me. "I love him more than I thought it was possible to love another person. He makes me laugh. He makes me feel safe. He makes me want to be braver than I am. When I read to him, when I cook for him, when I just sit with him in comfortable silence, those aren't duties or performances. They're the best parts of my day." "And you?" Thomas asked me. "She saved my life," I said simply. "Not financially, not practically, emotionally. She took a man who'd given up on happiness and reminded him what joy felt like. She's the first person I think about when I wake up and the last person I think about before I sleep. Victoria may have been the woman I agreed to marry, but Elena is the woman I choose to love every single day." Margaret Chen stood up. "I move that we accept full restitution from Mr. and Mrs. Cross and pursue criminal charges against Victoria Santos independently. All in favor." Every hand in the room went up. "Motion carried." Margaret smiled at us. "And I'd like to be the first to congratulate you both on finding something real in the middle of something fake. That takes courage." As the investors filed out, shaking our hands and offering support for whatever legal battles lay ahead. Elena collapsed into a chair. "I can't believe we just did that," she said. "I can't believe how brave you were," I replied, kneeling beside her chair. "Elena, what you just did, exposing yourself like that, taking responsibility for someone else's crimes, that's the most courageous thing I've ever witnessed." "I had to. Those people trusted Victoria because they thought she was me, because they thought she was your wife trying to help you. I couldn't let them pay for her lies. Even though it means everyone will know how we really got married." She smiled the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in days. "You know what I realized while I was talking? I'm not ashamed of our story anymore. Yes, it started with deception, but it turned into something beautiful. We found real love in the middle of fake circumstances. That's not something to hide from. That's something to celebrate." I stood up and pulled her into my arms. "Elena Santos Cross, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Even though I'm not the woman you married, you're exactly the woman I married." The woman I married was kind and brave and selfless, someone who would sacrifice everything for the people she loved. I just didn't know her name was Elena instead of Victoria. She laughed and the sound was like music. "So what happens now? Now we go home, we have dinner, we read poetry on the couch. We plan our real honeymoon somewhere Elena wants to go, not somewhere Victoria would have chosen. We build a life together based on truth instead of lies." And Victoria will face the consequences of her choices. But that's not our story anymore. Our story is about two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to walk into the light together. 6 months later, Elena and I renewed our vows in a small ceremony in our garden, surrounded by the people who knew and loved our real story. Her parents were there, her father in a wheelchair, but lucid enough to walk her down the aisle, her mother sober for the first time in years, and finally proud of the daughter who had saved them all. Victoria was serving 18 months in federal prison for securities fraud and identity theft. She'd refused all contact from Elena, apparently unable to forgive her sister for choosing love over loyalty to family secrets. But as I watched Elena laugh with her father, as I saw her gentle hands adjusting his blanket and making sure he was comfortable, I knew Victoria had lost the only thing that really mattered, the chance to be loved by someone who would sacrifice everything for her happiness. Elena had sacrificed everything for love, first for her family, then for me, then for the strangers Victoria had defrauded. And in return, she'd found something Victoria would never understand, a love that saw her clearly, valued her truly, and chose her daily. As we danced in our garden under string lights, Elena in a simple white dress she'd chosen herself, I whispered in her ear, "No more secrets. No more secrets," she promised. "Just truth and love and whatever comes next. What comes next is forever," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Because sometimes the best love stories start with the wrong person and end with the right one. Sometimes you have to lose your sight to really see. And sometimes the greatest gift isn't getting what you thought you wanted. It's discovering that what you actually needed was something far more beautiful than you ever dared to dream.